G'day guys, welcome. I want to make it pretty clear, well not pretty clear, I'll make it very clear, crystal fucking clear, that performance, that display, 38-point loss against Melbourne at Icon Park last night, where both teams had to play in those conditions, was shit. That performance was shit. I think we can all acknowledge that. We don't have to go down the line of, it's only a practice game. I'm just talking about that performance yesterday was shit. Now, I don't know. I just don't know whether this performance, and let's face it, our two preseason games, I don't think we were particularly impressive against the Cats, although I thought we were a little bit better against Geelong than we were against Melbourne. But I don't know how this will define us and what it all means. I mentioned that last week, but what does all mean? Because we could have come out and blown both teams away and won both. And would have it really mattered? Because, we've got to take the Brisbane Lions on in the first game of the year, and that's going to be one of the biggest tasks. What would you take? Where we are right now, two pretty fucking average performances, one really shit one yesterday, or we blew the opposition out of the park in a preseason game. It just, look, I just feel like in the position we're in, you're pretty much on a hiding to nothing. I think you want to look after the season proper, and it's such a long and brutal year that if you're getting your knickers in the knot right here, right now, over a pre-season game, it's just going to be tough going. So what I do know is, and I thought about this last night, because I got to admit, as much as I thought it was such a shit performance, and I didn't take away really many positives at all from that game, is I was thinking that the teams that we played, the Cats last week and then Melbourne last night, I'm not saying they are top echelon football teams, teams as in sides. They've both got their challenges. They're both probably there's question marks on both of them leading into this season. But what we do know is they are ultra professional units and ultra professional football clubs. And I know Melbourne have got some significant challenges over the preseason, and their culture has been questioned. I don't necessarily want to get into that. I'm talking more around building a football team, building a sustainable football team that's in a position to challenge on a regular basis, and Geelong has been the best at it, and it wouldn't surprise anyone if they rebounded this year and played finals again. I know they missed last year, and they've just been a super team with a really strong leadership, through their coaches into the football team, and have built that team culture. And the same must be said about Melbourne as well, And if you've looked at those games, like Melbourne, I don't think they came out last night and were smarting over us beating them in that final last year. Although, when we played Collingwood in a practice game last year, I remember supporters saying, we got revenge on them for beating us right on the death nail in that game, which kicked us out of the top 8. So I don't know, but they played last night like not a team possessed. I'm not saying they played like a team possessed. That's more, I suppose, motivation. But they played like a team that had done a lot of work a lot of work behind the scenes over the off season to improve the way they play. And there was a steeliness about their leaders as well and the way they performed. It was almost like, okay, we want to go somewhere this year. You know, like we've been kicked out of the finals 2 years running, and we're really steeling ourselves. And I feel like they're in a really strong position to do that. Whether they have the personnel to go all the way, that's debatable. But they do have really strong leaders, and we've taken on two teams and two clubs that are very, very strong in regards to just building that consistency over a period of time. They've been contending. We know the history. I mean, Melbourne, premiership. Geelong, premiership. But consistent finals. And you don't play finals consistently unless you have a really strong system and a really strong base. And exceptional sort of leadership across the board. So I just wanted to put that out there, because the reason why I'm putting it out there right here, right now, is that we aren't that team yet. And we aren't that club yet. And the more we sort of, it's not the case of pretending we are, but the more we sort of like fool ourselves that we are that club yet, or that team yet, I think we're sort of hiding to nothing. I feel like I've been really disappointed with what we've dished up, obviously, in the preseason, more around, not so much the result, but more around what we look like and the way we play. And, you know, Melbourne have gone away. They're a team that had a fantastic system, won a grand final with that system, but I've identified that their connection between their mids in their front half last year was just such a concern. And it was more based around, a lot of the talk was based around whether they had a good enough forwards. But last night, and it might just be one game, and it might be too early to call with Melbourne, but last night they just opened us up. And it was more to do with the way they moved the ball inside forward 50. And I know we'll talk about how poor Brody Kemp and Lewis Young and Mitch McGovern were as our defenders, and how much we miss Caleb Marchbank. But I thought when Jacob Wiedering went down, I had so many supporters when Jacob, everything would be all right. You know, one soldier down. We're Carlton now. We played in a prelim final now. We'll just get, it's all about system. Well, fucking hell, Melbourne just completely made our team defence look absolutely second rate. Now, they've worked on that over the preseason. It was clearly identifiable. They've got Salem into the midfield, who's a beautiful user. They instead of bombing the ball in, they honoured the leads. They had so much space. Forwards weren't going into the same direction, and the amount of marks they took inside forward 50 in that first half was just ridiculous. So their system, like Geelong the week before, was just so much better. And I know when you lose a game of football, you always go, well, their system was better. But I'll keep saying it. It's all duck or no dinner, it appears, with our football club. Unless we're bullying the opposition at the coalface and smashing them at the ball around the stoppage, Cripps and Hewitt and Chera and Kennedy if he's playing, and Pitnet wins a clearance or two, or the Conning, he gets the balls at ground level. We are, there's not a lot out. There's not a lot else, and our transition work is still, like we talk about this, still a work in progress. Like I see slight improvement, but not a lot of improvement. And we're talking about now once we get Williams back. But I mean, I don't know. I look at those first two games, guys, and yesterday in particular, I think, what have we been fucking doing over the off season? What have we been doing? What have we been doing? And Harry looks in terrific nick. He looks in magnificent nick. In fact, he's shed a few kilos. He's running on top of the ground. But what's he been doing over the off season? Because he can't kick over a fucking jam tent. What has Brodie Kemp been doing over the off-season? What's the defensive coach been doing with Brodie Kemp? All the talk was at the end of last year, in a massive interview, Brodie Kemp said that the area of his game he wants to improve on is one-on-one defending. In the first 2 games of the preseason, and I know it looks like he has gone backwards. And don't talk to us about transition and ball movement. Like, it's non-existent, whether we have the skills or the personnel to deliver on what they want. And that is just, once again, I'll bring it back. I'm talking about the preseason games and yesterday in particular, because I find it really funny. I know I get on my high horse about this, but the fans, Carlton fans, have been invited to 2 open training sessions for the whole of the preseason. I know they have one next week, but two, one before Christmas and one just after the New Year. We've been invited to the club to watch training. The rest have been fucking closed sessions. Now, I got on X or Twitter it was recently, had a bit of a whinge about that, and I said, fucking hell, this isn't good enough. You know, like, fuck, we're entitled to go and maybe once a fortnight and watch these boys train, see what they're doing as members of the football club. And I had people come at me, and everyone's got their right. And part of it, I understand, needs to be a balance. You know, what we're doing behind closed doors, we want to keep secret, you know. But the irony is that the Collingwood, who played on the Wednesday night against the Tigers, and Melbourne, who we played against last night, every session is open, and I understand that they have grounds which are open to the public because they're public areas, but it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect the way they play or the system they have. And I just want to ask the question, what the fuck are we playing our cards close to our chest? Have we got something up our sleeve that we're just going to bring out against Brisbane, in round 1 or round fucking 0, whatever you want to call it, and we're just going to go, wow, where did this come from? This is what we've been hiding, because I don't see, other than the team that got on a rock and roll last year and were just won the ball and fucking just bullied the opposition, which is so important. It's so important that being able to do that, because the game, you got to win the ball, you know, like the game is the ball's there, you got to win it, and we're pretty good at that. But yeah, this is this modern game, mate. Like, the modern game is able to win the ball on turnover, you know, in our back half, and then transition with speed and precision and execute, whether it's by foot or by hand, and make the right decisions and open the ground up. And I don't know. I just haven't seen it in the first 2 games. And full credit to the D's, you know, like they look like for one game, it looks like they're going about trying to fix that problem, because we know they're an exceptional defensive football team. And a case in point, guys, I don't know how seriously we took this game, watching players chatting to the opposition and giggling and laughing and smiling. I don't know whether we're in a position to do that, but look at the leadership. I know we're missing Jacob Wiedering, but look at the leadership of Jake Lever late in that game, where this is a practice game. It's 35 degrees. Charlie Curnow kicks a lucky goal off. Was it Charlie kicked the goal off the ground, or Harry kicked the goal off the ground late in the game? And fucking Jake Lever, he called Stephen May over, and then he called his other mids to get back, and the other defenders that was leadership in a nutshell, you know. Like, so we know Melbourne are really good defensively, but they showed another level to the way they played last night with their ball use going inside 450, and the way they're prepared to mix that midfield up. You know, Salem in there. I thought Tom Sparrow was exceptional. There's a guy that looks like he's going to go from maybe a B grade player to potentially an A grade player. And wouldn't we love someone like a David Cunningham or a Lockie Fogarty to go to that level. We just don't get that from that next group of players, So, well, at the moment, we don't anyway. What I might do just quickly is just run through individually the players and just give a quick assessment how I think they performed just in these practice games. Who fucking knows how they're training over the preseason. As I said, we've been to 2 open training sessions. 2 open training sessions. So we can only gauge on their performances in the game. Cowan played last week, showed a little bit. Did he play VFL? He's in the mix, I suppose, to be that one of those hybrid defenders. Still young. Motlop injured last night, bit of a concern, toe injury. Didn't do a hell of a lot against the Cats, but we know he's lively, and we missed that zip. Ollie Hollands, I thought, was excellent against the Cats, but a little bit quieter last night. Although I like the move of him into the midfield, but he's still a slight body and his ball use isn't great. I thought he fumbled a bit last night, but he's still a kid. Expect him to have a reasonable year. I felt Adam Cherry's been somewhat down on input and output. Just think he's been a little bit one-paced, not great ball use, so I expect a lot more from him. Williams apparently got through a VFL game. Will he come in? At whose expense? How many running defenders will we play? It's a good question to ask. Kennedy, the same. Apparently played in the VFL yesterday and performed strongly, but how many of those sort of one-paced inside mids that we need? We know he plays a serviceable role. Fogarty actually thought he pressured really well, but how many of those pressure type players can you have who don't finish the job up forward? And he just doesn't kick goals. He just does not hit the scoreboard. Can't fault his determination. No, Cripps has been serviceable, but not great. Harry, I think's in, as I mentioned before, terrific nick. Absolutely looks on fire. And I mentioned it last week, I like the not the experiment, but having him be the second ruck. I really like that. Gives him an opportunity to get up the ground. And yeah, I think he's in good nick, but that kicking. Gov was poor. Thought he was really poor last night. In fact, the whole defence, the way they worked for each other was poor. De Conning being horrendous in the first 2 games. What does it mean? Who knows? But if that's the type of football he's going to produce in the first part of the year, then he's going to have his work cut out. I mean, he's going to come up against McInerney, who are really rate. He killed us in last year's prelim final. It's a big ask. Akers is serviceable, particularly pushing back, taking some strong contested marks in the back half as a winger. I think he's okay, works pretty hard for us. I actually didn't mind Fantasia's work up around the ball, pushing up the ground early in that game, whether it was through the centre, across the wing. He's a high half forward, but I thought his work inside forward 50 was a little bit down. Such a long way to go with him. It's such a long way to go, and I can't formulate a really strong opinion on him, other than saying if he can get back to his absolute best, he will be an asset for us, but he's far from that. He's far from that at the moment. Thought Doc looked really slow in both games, really slow. I know playing him through the midfield, but I thought out of all our midfielders, his ball use was probably the best. I know he hit Harry up a couple of times inside forward 50, so that was a positive, but he just looks slow. And I don't know, does he look a fraction lost? Where's he playing? What's his role? And is that shoulder? I know they wouldn't be playing him if he wasn't right, but he doesn't. I don't know. It's something about Doc in these first 2 games. It's hot. Okay, he's a veteran. I'm not too concerned about that, but it does look. We got a lot of those labouring sort of one-paced sort of midfield types with no second or third gear, which really does worry me. Carroll, I don't know, like, Jesus Christ, he played a little bit last week, but played VFL yesterday. Kemp, horrendous in both games until yesterday. He showed in the second half that he can take an intercept grab. Now, they can't all be intercept defenders. What the fuck has he been doing over the preseason? All the talk was about him improving his one-on-one defence, and that it was worse, as bad as I've seen. Whether it was a guy a little bit taller than him, whether it was a smaller guy or a medium-sized guy, he pushed out of the way, poor body positioning. And I know there was probably not a lot of pressure further up the field, but Jesus Christ. But at least he rebounded. At least he would have gone in at half time with his tail between his legs, but he's come out and actually performed quite strongly in the second half. No Walsh concern. Fuck, the new injury-prone Corey Durden, haven't seen him. Elijah Hollands, a couple of flashy things. Pretty hard at the contest, I've got to admit. Didn't realise he was that hard. But we're not going to see him for the first 2 weeks. Been a small positive. Jack Martin injured. Marchbank, mystery virus. Wiedering, big concern. Newman just looks off the pace. Veteran, the heat, another pre-season. I just felt like it was classic mistake Nick Newman, the one that we saw when he first arrived at the club that was a little bit loose and a little bit all over the shop. Binns didn't do a lot when he came on. He looks small. But it's very hard to gauge him on that performance. Pitnet, terrible, absolutely shocking. Got his fucking ass handed to him on a platter by Max Gawn and looks a real problem at the moment. Cunningham just doesn't do enough. Just does not do enough. Flashes in occasionally. Yeah, Hewitt has a dip. How many of those? I've mentioned it. How many of those have a dip types? They're gonna keep you honest, but we need probably northern honesty. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, Charlie, I've got to say with Charlie, that type of performance against quality opposition, and you kick 3 goals and don't have a huge impact on the game. At least he's kicked his 3. That is the performance of a forward who can at least have an impact, which he didn't necessarily. And I'm saying I'm not comparing a fucking practice game to a final, but Stephen May looked pretty bloody on his game last night, but he was still able to outmark him a couple of times. So he looks a little bit down at the moment and not getting that, I suppose, that relationship with Harry and separating and working together as well as they should be. Haven't seen Lemmy. Haven't seen Carroll, Lewis Young. Oh. Now there's talk of potentially Sam Durden coming in, who played in the VFL yesterday and taking that role. Monahan, no. Billy Wilson got a sniff late, turned the ball over a couple of times. Boyd, good last week, not so good last night, although I think the challenge for Boyd is, we know how good he is with ball in hand, and we saw that a couple of times last night. The challenge for him is to impact the game more, to get the ball in his hands more. Our challenge is to find him more. Is he good enough footballer to be able to read the play well enough to get on the end of it? Because we need the ball in his hands. He's our sort of Jaden Short, but is he he's obviously not a better reader of the play than a Jaden Short. But we need the ball in his hands, and we just don't get enough of it. I don't think 12, 13 possessions is enough, okay? Unless he's pure lockdown and he's keeping a Keziah Pickett or one of their smalls goalless, and he's making the most of his kicks. I like the idea of him kicking out from fullback. I really do, because it's penetrating and he's smart with his ball use. So it wasn't I think it was a positive what he produced over the course of the 2 games. Mentioned Durden, got through a VFL game. Chincotta, question marks, jury's out on him, and so it should be. He's a kid that's done it the hard way, but I thought he had his hands full last night. I haven't seen O'Keefe for Q. Sard, thought these 2 games were pretty bloody good, but we're not getting the spring. You know, all his work's done. All Adam Sard's work he's hard. It just feels like everything he's doing is fucking hard. He's got to do it the hard way. He's not getting on the end of it. We're not releasing him. And I thought that's what he was brought to the club to do. Moya played in the VFL yesterday, showed a few little signs. Oh, he's another one who's becoming that sneakily consistent injured player, Murkoff. And I thought Murkoff we didn't see, and Cottrell I thought played 2 pretty fucking ordinary games. And I don't think he's the type of player who can afford to keep that type of form up. Anyway, onwards and upwards, guys. We've got the Brisbane Lions coming up very shortly. I'll have a preview of that game out sometime next week. Take care.